In this video, we take a look at this latest book from Bitmap Books. Is this one that you should pick up? Pull up a chair and let's open this and find out. Hey everyone, Johnny here. Now, who doesn't love point-and-click graphic adventure games? You know the type, usually played on a computer with a mouse, lots of puzzles, picking up items and using them, lots of dialogue, well-crafted and usually humorous storylines, more items to pick up and use to solve puzzles, and all by pointing and clicking. And that's what you do in the games featured in the Art of Point-and-Click Adventure Games. Published by Bitmap Books and designed by Sam Dyer, this book is very similar in presentation to their books in the Visual Compendium series, of which I've looked at a couple already on this channel. But this book is physically larger, and instead of focusing on one computer platform or home console, this focuses on the genre of point-and-click adventure games, hence the title, across multiple platforms and throughout the years. We see its beginnings in the 1980s, which may have required a fair bit of typing in addition to the pointing and clicking, to the 1990s, full of all those classic 256 color VGA era games that everybody my age knows and loves. Then the 2000s, when the genre slowed down, to the resurgence in the 2010s with episodic games and crowd-funded indie efforts. This doesn't feature every game that exists in this genre, but of the over 120 games from 1984 to 2017, there's a decent selection, and there's a pretty good chance that some of your favorite computer games are here. You've got the King's Quest series, Space Quest, Police Quest, Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, Simon the Sorcerer, The Legend of Kyrandia, and besides those series, you've also got individual games like Grim Fandango, Full Throttle, Broken Age, Thimbleweed Park, The Adventures of Willie Beamish, Flight of the Amazon Queen, and so on. I mean, sure, there are some that are missing, but I guess it would be difficult to expect everything. One of the first point-and-click games I really got into when our family first got a PC was Rise of the Dragon, which is absent here. I was also disappointed that there was only one Tex Murphy game featured, but at least it was the best one, the Pandora Directive, although I would have thought that Under a Killing Moon was more groundbreaking.
This isn't a good time for a social call, pump. If I don't get it fixed soon, I'll go insane! Do me fasolatido!
Siberia is also a strange omission. I am certain your mileage will vary when it comes to nostalgia, but I still think their selection is overall pretty decent in terms of quantity and representation, just like with past books by Bitmap Books. As alluded to, if you like their Visual Compendium series, you get much of the same thing here. This is, after all, as the title implies, a book of art. The thing about point-and-click adventure games, more so than any other genre, is that each room or area has to be specifically designed to accommodate the scenarios and puzzles, and this craft includes the graphics, and so there is a lot of great hand-drawn pixel art here. The main content consists of games being described with a paragraph and two-page spreads featuring art from the game. Usually this will be a single screenshot spread across both pages, but sometimes there are two screenshots with one per page, or sometimes a popular game will get more than 2 pages. The Secret of Monkey Island, one of the biggest standouts in this genre, gets a whopping 8 pages to focus on character close-ups, various backgrounds, and even a look at the insult sword fighting system that was one of the highlights of the game. Interspersed through this book, usually immediately after a related game, will be an interview of someone that has worked on a game and provides some behind-the-scenes insight on these classics. This book is definitely heavier on the interviews than the Visual Compendium books, with over 40 dialogues in all, but for the most part they are quite interesting. And I was even surprised with how many names I'd actually recognized from before reading this book. Like Al Lowe, Brian Moriarty, Eric Chahi, Robin Miller, Ron Gilbert, and Tim Schafer. The games are listed in order of release year from 1984 to 2017. The few in the 1980s definitely start things off well. You've got Deja Vu, the first in a series of MacVenture games. LucasArts, or initially Lucasfilm Games, starts things off with Maniac Mansion and Zack McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders. Even this early on, Sierra did manage to churn out a number of chapters in their main Quest franchises, including the first 4 King's Quest games and the first 3 Space Quest games, all in charming EGA graphics. Then, the majority of this book takes place in the 1990s. 280 out of the 452 pages of the main content, which is more than 60%. This is my favorite era by far. Maybe it was because about this time our family, like most others, first got a PC, so many of my early computer gaming memories are here, like with my favorite Sierra games, Space Quest 4 and King's Quest 5, the first in each of their respective series to be in 256 colors. I've always felt that when it comes to hand-drawn graphics, these VGA graphics had the right number of colors and the right number of pixels. This allowed for enough detail that you knew what you were looking at, but not too much detail that you don't engage your imagination a little bit. A concern about higher resolutions which would naturally increase this generation is that raster graphics would soon be replaced by cold polygons, awkward pre-rendered figures, or footage of real actors that might not mesh too well with the scene. Bigger sprites but without as much of an increase in detail also tend to make things look more cartoony. I don't have a problem with cartoons, but something about the look in 1995 Space Quest 6 was rather off-putting. But maybe that's just me. The second half of the 1990s may be more of a mixed bag, with home computer technology bringing us CD-ROMs, voice acting, and polygons and other distinct graphical styles emerging, but it did bring us some great standouts, such as the visually unique The Last Express, the cartoony The Curse of Monkey Island, and the polygons of Grim Fandango. The 1990s ends with The Longest Journey, a great game and an appropriate end for the longest section in the book. But the start of the new millennium was a darker time for the genre, with fewer games, and there are no point-and-click games released in 2002 or 2004 that are featured here. While I was surprised at how many games I played, recognized, or at least heard of in the 1990s, I was even more surprised at how few games in the first decade of the 2000s I knew anything about before reading this book. I recall that I heard of Runaway at the time, and maps of Machinarium were submitted to my site vgmaps.com, but I didn't know of it at the time of its release. So other than the special edition remake of The Secret of Monkey Island, literally the only games I knew of in this decade were the episodic games from Telltale Games, like Bone and Sam & Max. Telltale Games was known for episodic games, in which games are released in parts spread out over time instead of all at once, and seem to have found more success in the 2010s with games like The Walking Dead. Unfortunately, they closed down, and rather abruptly, very shortly after the release of this book. The book praises Telltale Games for being among those keeping the genre alive, but their tragic and sudden end means that anything is said about them is almost a moot point, and immediately places the publication of this book in a specific window of time. I would like it if books of this type could be timeless by not drawing attention to when it was written, but in this case, I can't fault anyone here, other than maybe Telltale Games, because it seemed like nobody saw the end of Telltale Games coming. Not even the vast majority of their employees, from what I've heard. Anyway, other than the special edition remake of Monkey Island 2, and two other games also by LucasArts veterans Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert, Broken Age and Thimbleweed Park respectively, I haven't played any of the other games in the 2010s, or even heard of most of them. But, as can happen when reading books like these, I'm now tempted to play many of these games now that I've learned of their existence. There are some great looking games, with big, yet detailed, cartoony graphics, like the Deponia games, and the Whispered World, but I'm also quite intrigued by the deliberately 90s retro VGA look of games like Resonance and Techno Babylon, despite not knowing anything about these until seeing them here. So this book, just like the Visual Compendium series, may be a way to discover new games. And this really is a coffee table book. There's so much to see here, and it's fun to just browse. Though many of the games here are only represented by a single screenshot, you usually get a fair look at it, and seeing a scene outside of the gameplay gives you a chance to really slow down and appreciate the pixel art, particularly in the early 1990s, when all that had to be hand-drawn. But every era has its standouts, so you'd probably be happy to have this open on any page, except maybe pages 444 and 445, featuring 2015's surreal and nightmarish Fran Bow. Yeah. This creepy entry aside, the book is a visual delight and a joy to get through, just like the majority of these games. While a common adventure game protagonist might often say, "I can't pick that up," they never meant this book, because I do think that you should pick this up. Definitely recommend it if you like these kinds of games. It's great for nostalgia or for finding new experiences. If you're not familiar with the point-and-click genre, then it could still be an art book of pixelated environments. The creator interviews provide interesting insight, so this is more than just pretty pictures. However you read it, and regardless of your fondness of the genre, it is clearly a quality book. Despite missing a few point-and-click adventures that I thought could have been in here, it would be difficult to give this less than a perfect score. So, 5 out of 5. Pick up your copy of the art and point-and-click adventure games from Bitmap Books. Also, they just recently opened up an American site, so if you are from the United States, you can order this and other books from there now. Thanks for pointing and clicking on this video. If you enjoy my book reviews, or any of my other game-related or geeky videos, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until the next adventure, see ya!